Hi, I'm Diego, and this is my story about being a translator for International Mr. Leather. So, when I was 21, I moved to Chicago from College Park, Maryland, where I'd gone to school for absolutely no reason, and arrived completely unemployed 2 months before 9/11. And after a series of temp jobs, I eventually got a full-time job, and then after about a year and a half working there, I decided it was time for me to go to grad school. And so I decided to get a master's in applied linguistics so I could teach English as a second language overseas. And so my plan was to get my master's and then to move overseas and teach English at a university. But an unexpected thing that happened when I first moved to Chicago was that I came out of the closet. So I was 23, just came roaring out, and I planned to experience everything, tore through Boys Town bars, making out with almost anybody, with a picture of a Long Island iced tea in my hand, and that's just a Sunday afternoon. I went to Charlie's every weekend, which used to begin as gay line dancing. And then at 2 a.m. it would transform into like a full-fledged gay nightclub with the densest fog at any nightclub I have ever experienced in my life. I got highlights, I had longer hair. I got highlights at Robert Jeffrey on Halstead Street. I went to Hydrate for one more drink at 3:45 a.m. where my friend and I finished off the night with a White Russian and a vodka Red Bull, respectively. I was tasting all the flavors and enjoying my mid-20s. So when a friend told me the Swedish contestant of the annual International Mr. Leather competition needed a translator, I was in, all right? So for those of you straights who are wondering what International Mr. Leather is, it's probably exactly what you think it is. Assless chaps, puppy play, cages, the most innovative sexual contraptions I have ever seen in my entire life, probably that humanity has ever conceived of. And I was, a 23-year-old baby twink, and I didn't have any experience in the leather community, so I was really excited to kind of dig into that. So my assignment as a translator was simple. I was going to be a translator for the contestant from Sweden, so each region sends a contestant. And I actually spoke pretty good Swedish, having been a student, exchange student in Sweden a few years before while I was in college. And I learned the language while I was there. So my friend told me that the Swedish contestant needed a translator, and I said, why would a contestant from Sweden need a translator for English? And those of you who have been to the Nordic countries are familiar with the fact that, English is very, very widely spoken in those countries. And it's very unusual for someone not to speak English. So my friend explained that the Swedish contestant was actually not originally from Sweden. He was a refugee from Iraq and had moved to Sweden during the Iraq War. And so he didn't speak English because he wasn't totally raised in Sweden, but he spoke Arabic and Swedish. So he needed a translator to kind of help him through the day-to-day of a competition. And so I was nervous, right? I was excited to use my Swedish, but I didn't know anything about the leather scene. It's never my thing. I wanted to be respectful, but I was also really curious. Would I ask stupid questions? Would the leather bears laugh at me because I was so skinny and baby-faced? Would the Swedish contestant like me? Would we get married and move to Sweden and live there permanently forever? These are all the things that were dancing around in my mind. So, the day arrives. I get to the hotel. The competition's in a hotel. And all the contestants, I guess one from each region or country, were lined up in a hallway in a very nondescript part of this very large hotel in the Loop in Chicago, waiting to have their official contestant photos taken. The walls in this part of the hotel were really, really gross and banged up. There were people who worked catering who had like those big like wheelie bins of just everyone's dirty dishes, just walking by. it was not very glamorous. It was not the glamour that I had been hoping for at the International Mr. Leather competition. But I kind of just put my disappointment aside and I said, whatever, Diego, you're at IML. It's IML, Diego. So the guy was there, the contestant was there, and I met him. He was wearing a leather vest with no shirt, body hair everywhere, probably upwards of 200 pounds, but like a built 200 pounds. And not at all my type, but I was in my 20s. So I said, introduce myself. Hey, I'm Diego. Oh, hi, he said. How's Chicago for you? Fine, I guess. Are you Swedish? No, but I speak Swedish pretty well. Oh, okay. It kind of went like that. The whole first day, he was nonplussed to say the least, but I was undaunted. I showed up the next day. I found my contestant in another part of the hotel, the part of the hotel in the lobby, which turns into basically a 24-hour nightclub during these things. It's really, really fun. But my contestant was with somebody else. That person was a real Swedish person, not some Diego masquerading as a Swedish person. And this other Swedish person was blonde. He was also shirtless and wearing a leather vest, which is pretty entry-level Leatherman wear at these types of events. I was wearing a sale rack H&M t-shirt and tight diesel jeans that were probably women's jeans. And so I paled in terms of leather in comparison to this leatherier, Swedisher, blonder, taller translator. So no one said anything to me at first. I kind of got that feeling where you feel like nobody's looking at you because there's something that they want to tell you, but they don't want to tell you because they don't want to make you uncomfortable, but you're uncomfortable anyway. Which is very Swedish, honestly. So, I don't know. I kind of tagged along for whatever the initial thing was that day. I don't really remember. I was a very determined third wheel. And eventually, the new Swedish translator turned to me, and I think he said something like, I can take it from here. And I got the picture. And so I left. Embarrassed. I was embarrassed, even though there was no reason for me to be embarrassed. And I don't really remember exactly how long that second day was, but I remember thinking like I had gotten up and showered, and I remember thinking like I hadn't been there long enough for it to have been worth the effort of showering and taking the train to the hotel. So I left embarrassed, even though there's nothing for me to be embarrassed about. So why did my Swedish leather daddy send me home? I have no idea. I had no idea then. I have no idea now. I'll probably never know. But honestly, it was a little bit of a relief, if I'm being honest, because I'm not really into leather.